Hey guys, it's Frederik of the FWX podcast. I'm going to be talking about Marvel's latest project for the MCU called Wonder Man. It is out right now. You can go watch it. In fact, if you haven't watched it yet, I kind of urge you to do it because I'm going to issue here a huge spoiler warning. I'm going to talk about what happens in the series, and I might even go into some rumors and also things that might be necessary for the upcoming slate of movies and projects that Marvel is working on. Okay, but first I would like to inform you that you can like this video. You can also subscribe to this channel and to the podcast. And if you do that, this kind of content will become more available. I talk a lot about movies and TV series, specifically when it comes to superheroes and action. I talk a lot about franchises. I talk a lot about fantasy, about story building, world building, character building as well. And I'll be doing that in a moment with this series with Wonder Man. And we'll start with that in a moment. But first, you can also share this with friends and family, or maybe the colleagues that you have at your work, or maybe just here online as well. And you can comment away in the comment section down below. And if you do that, please be kind and friendly when you do that. Also, I'm not a native English speaker, so if I screw something up, that is normal. If I mispronounce something, that is quite human to do. We're all people, we all make mistakes. Let's own those mistakes. So if I get something wrong, actually, in fact, you can correct me down below in the comment section if you want to. Okay, let's start talking about Wonder Man. I'm going to get a little smaller for this so I can show you guys on the screen. So, Wonder Man is out. It is about this guy, Simon Williams, played in this series by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, who plays Simon Williams, a human actor in Hollywood who has garnered somehow extraordinary superpowers. And Yahya portrays Simon in this role for this TV series, and he is joined by this. Get a better picture here. Actually, let's get into the pictures. So I talked about Yahya for a moment. Let's also talk about another huge character in this. Maybe this is a good picture. Yeah. Uh, the man on this side right here is Trevor Slattery, aka the Mandarin from Marvel, played by the incredible Sir Ben Kingsley, who you might know from many, many projects, including playing Gandhi in a movie. Yahya, you will also know from playing one of Aquaman's enemies in the two Aquaman Jason Momoa led movies. Actually, let's get into Yahya a moment longer. I've seen him in quite a few things. I really like his work. Like I said, he plays in two Aquaman movies, like you see right here. He played in Ambulance along with another MCU person, that is Jake Gyllenhaal. He also did work in other uh, horror or superhero centric stuff like Watchmen and Candyman, which is more horror. He was in a movie I saw years ago, The Matrix Resurrections. Yeah, many more movies. Like Manta. That's what it says right here. I forgot the name that he plays of the villain in Aquaman, but it's a Black Manta, as it stands right there. Okay, so he's been at work for quite a long time. He's an actor, and so he's kind of playing himself, given who he is. But in this series from Marvel, he portrays a role that might actually become pretty important going forward. I'm gonna get into the episodes here for a moment. So I'm not gonna read it verbatim, but like I already said, Yahya plays Simon Williams, who's an actor in Hollywood who just got fired from a small role in the TV series American Horror Story. And hold up. By the way, I'm going to reference a lot of pop culture stuff in here because there's a lot of Easter eggs in here, even more when you watch it. But I'm going to mention some of those anyway because they're quite prominent. Okay, my bad. So he just got fired from his small role in American Horror Story, the TV series, because he has a very specific way of handling the characters that he plays, which is overthinking and making requests for changes. He is quickly after that dumped by his girlfriend, Vivian, and Simon is actually obsessed with a role from years and years ago, the original Wonder Man, which was a movie that he used to go watch with his father. And as after getting dumped, he goes to watch a movie in the local theater. And as he is walking out of this movie, he meets up with Trevor Slattery, best known for playing the Mandarin in Universe, the same figure that we know for those Marvel fans who are watching uh, the Mandarin as in that special presentation from years ago, but also in Iron Man 3. And Trevor actually tells Simon that he himself is actually auditioning for a remake of that old Wonder Man movie because it's currently being remade by acclaimed director Von Kovac. And Von Kovac in this series is played by. Uh, hold on. This man, Zlatko Buric, or Buric, however you're supposed to say it. And so Simon gets in touch with his agent, Janelle Jackson, played in this movie by this woman, ex Mayo. So Simon gets in touch with her and asks her, basically begs her to get on that project, the remake of Wonder Man. But she chides him because of how the way that he's been acting and because he got fired. So he goes to see her for real in a face to face meeting in her office. And he uses that moment to do a little illicit stuff by checking on her computer for the audition information. And he goes anyway to that audition. And Trevor, again, played by Sir Ben Kingsley, points out to Simon, who's doing trying to do this audition, but he does it by overthinking things and making requests and all of that. By just you need to settle down, you need to calm down. That's the way that you will get this. To basically perform in a more natural way. After the audition, they go out, they have a couple of drinks, and we see that Mr. Slattery, again, played by the incredible Serpent Kingsley, and I'm gonna try and get some of the pictures here actually. So there's a good portrayal of him in the role itself. And Trevor tells Simon that that I'm gonna rephrase for a moment. So after they went out, they had drinks. Trevor gets a call, picks up, and it turns out to be somebody else. That's important here. Yeah, back for a second. Gets a call from this guy, Agent Cleary from the Department of Damage Control, played by Arian Moyat, right here, who we've seen before in both Miss Marvel TV series and in the Spider-Man, the last movie that we've seen before the Brand New Day movie. And he appears in this project too as someone working in the LA office of the Department of Damage Control. And so Trevor is called up by him because actually Trevor is working for the DODC to confirm that he has met up with Simon, who the DODC has long suspected of having superpowers, and for that reason is considered extremely dangerous and also unstable. And that's episode 1. Okay, I'm gonna get into episode 2. By the way, before I do that, the first episode is called Matinee, whatever that means exactly in universe. Okay, episode 2 is named Self Tape. Obviously, a self tape is when you go and record something for yourself. So we get a prologue where Travis Slattery has returned from doing his time in prison, but he is hoping to return to Hollywood, and he is in, as he says it himself, intent on living up to his mother's hopes for him to be an actor. Unfortunately, he is immediately arrested by the FBI. Hold up, I'm gonna do this differently. No, that was not my intention. Hold up, guys. There we are. I was hoping for a picture of that. Anyway, let's continue where I left off. So we get the little prologue of Trevor Slattery returning to Hollywood. He's immediately arrested by the FBI, and again he meets up with Cleary, again Aria Moyat's character from the DODC, to work with him. And it's basically making a deal here in that if Trevor works for the FBI or the DODC in this case with Cleary, he does not have to go to prison so they can find Simon Williams and potentially lock him up for having powers. But they have to but the DODC has to have enough information on that. So that was the prologue. That's how episode 2 begins. And then we come back to the present, where our friend Janelle, played by X Mayo, tells Simon that actually that audition that you did, the more natural way that you did it, not how you usually do it, actually impressed the auditioners. Casting, the casting director is the name for it, and now you have to send in a self tape audition. Like I said, that's what the name or the title is for. So Simon tries his best to film it kind of in the same way that we do as podcasters, with a camera or a laptop, or in a kind of way where you use your phone in that kind of way, and then we actually see him do that. I'm gonna try and look it up for a second. Oh, yeah, kind of like this picture right here. Oh, this is a little too slow. Ah, here we get a decent look at that. So that's one of the ways that you can actually tape that. I haven't done that myself that way, but that is one of the ways that you can do it. Well, I'm assuming you can do it that way because in world, I don't know how they can clarify that kind of design. But anyway, so Simon gets frustrated trying to do that, and he goes back and forth looking through his laptop for one of those old self tape videos so he can get inspired. But then he sees his ex, the one that dumped him, in one of those videos, which causes him to activate his powers. And we actually get a look of him, of how he looks when his powers activate, and that his kind of like you see, this is a video of a video. Try and get a better one. This is from later, but you kind of see a kind of storm brewing in his eyes, where he starts to glow. Yeah, like this moment right here. That might be exactly from the moment that I'm talking about. So Simon, as I just said, has powers, and in a moment of not getting to the point of actually doing what he has to do, activates his powers, and he releases an explosion of energy in his own apartment, destroying a good portion of the wall of the couch that he was sitting on. And he meets back up with Trevor Slattery for help, just as Trevor has gotten the clear from. Didn't mean to do this with this pun. Trevor has just gotten the clear from Special Agent Cleary to use a specific device. He's got this special kind of ring to hack Simon's computer and get potentially some evidence of Simon using his powers or even accidentally if he does it. And that leads the two of them to kind of go on a road trip of sorts. Let's see if we can get a picture of them in the car. Yeah, here's a picture of them in the car. Maybe there's a better one here. Yeah, this is a bigger one. So, because LA is a big place, they get in a car, they go and look for a place to get some alone time to film Simon so he can film himself with a self tape, of course, because he needs to send it in. And he's running against the time. He's almost running out of time, actually. And he's getting calls from Janelle at the same time, who is getting impatient with him, definitely. And that ends, that makes him end up at another guy's place. At first, they just went to Slattery's place in an upper level, which led to them in an upper level of a hotel where Trevor is living in because he does still have some kind of money. So he's set up in a place. And then finally they get into that road trip that I said. And they go to a guy called Joe Pantoliano, who is also a real person. Another Easter egg in here. But and unfortunately, the self taping also doesn't work right there. And they get into it with this guy, with Joe Pantoliano, who actually portrays himself as seen here in this picture from the show. And finally, they return back to Simon's apartment where they finally film a successful taping. And then, unfortunately, as Trevor has his moments to hack Simon's computer with that special ring, he also discovers what happened to the place, what caused Simon to set off that explosion that they had earlier, getting frustrated because things weren't working out. Like you can see here in this picture, that maybe not the best. So maybe this one. It's a bit bigger. Yeah, so Simon at that moment in on the couch where he virtually lost his shit basically, and he managed to cover it up, and that's the last moment from that episode of Self Tape, where Trevor reveals that quite literally by pulling the blanket out of the way, and that's episode 2, Self Tape. And then we go to episode 3, called Pacoima, which is another neighborhood in the city of Los Angeles, where Simon is originally from. So, Special Agent Cleary from the DODC hasn't been able to find some kind of evidence from Simon from his computer, so he tells Slattery, he tells Trevor, so using pictures here. So our special agent tells Trevor, played by the incredible things. I'm gonna rephrase for a moment. I'm getting ahead of myself. So again, the special agent asks Trevor to get clear evidence, maybe even develop a bond, a relationship, a real relationship, to get information. And when I say real relationship, I mean like a friendship, obviously. Because it's clear that Simon is into women. And I'll come back on that in a moment. And so, Simon's mom is actually, it's her birthday in a couple of days. And so Trevor asks to Simon, would it be okay if I were to join you and your family for this moment? And Simon initially has nothing against that, so he takes Trevor with him to his home to Pacoima for the birthday party of his mom. But Trevor has also gotten another tech piece from Special Agent Cleary, specifically a wiretap. But I'm gonna use the picture here. Maybe I can find it. I'll just show an image from him for a moment. So Slat, yeah, Slattery gets from Special Agent Cleary a wiretap, kind of like with anything that you plug in along cord with like a recording device at the end. And instead of like putting that up for your clothes and all of that, he just puts that in like a in his whatever. I'm doing a lot with nothing here. Sorry. Anyway, so he used the wiretap to record the conversations, and so Trevor gets to meet Simon's immediate family, his mom, his brother Eric, and other relatives. And also important here, Simon's brother is played by Demetrius Gross, and this is also there's a link here for that info about Simon's brother because it's another known character from Marvel's comics. And Simon has to kind of lie to his mom as they're there that things are going well, but also not at the same time because, well, Simon is lying because he's leading with the American Horror Story thing that he is doing. So he is no longer doing that, which is why he's lying. But then also telling about him and Trevor and doing Wonder Man a remake. Let's just try and use that with the cat pictures actually. Koima. Sorry. It's a good picture. No small one though. I'm trying my best here, guys. This is I'm doing this a bit different. But anyway. Some other pictures here. Relevant later. Yeah, so Trevor meets up with Simon's extended family, tries to talk to them about things, and Simon's mom says to Trevor that he's always been kind of lonely, but she's quite happy now that he has a friend in Trevor. Although at the same time, we get moments with Simon and his brother Eric where Eric has always been not just skeptical, but he doesn't trust his own brother because, well, let's get real for a moment here. Uh, it's tough in the film business, just as in real life. You never know if this is really ever gonna work out unless you are having consistent projects actually. And so that is what happening. That is what Eric always seems. That I'll rephrase again. Uh, Eric thinks that that is always what seems to be happening with Simon. That he has this way of being because it's always been that way, which actually might be part of the which is part of the plot because Simon is actually suppressing his powers because he knows just how powerful he is, but he just can't show that to the world because if he does, he will get arrested and convicted and put in a jail. And that is all relevant to the plot here. And I'm about to go get into that in a moment more in the next episode and the other ones after that. But first, let's continue here. So, this is an interesting show where a lot of the in-universe worlds look so much like our own world. It's just that there are enhanced beings living in it. From big red presidents to people that can shrink themselves, like Ant-Man and the Wasp and all of that. Okay, so back to the info, back to the story of Wonder Man. And so that leads into a conflict with Simon and his brother. And in a moment of frustration, Simon actually breaks the kitchen island that actually his mom has wanted for so long. But because Simon is so damn frustrated, he just unleashes what he has in that moment and it unintentionally destroys that part of the kitchen. And that leads to a falling out, of course, with the family, which leads to Simon and Trevor leaving the party. And as they are doing that, Simon also tells to Trevor that this is the first time somebody outside of my family knows about my powers. And he's kind of got this doubt that, like, maybe my family is right. Maybe I should just give it up. Which leads to Trevor kind of doubling down on trying to trust Simon. Because this is something that could wreck both of their careers. Although Slattery is doing this to save his as well at the same time. But in the end, he decides to destroy the recording from the tape, just as the ex Miles character, Janelle Jackson, who is Simon's agent, she calls Simon up, and actually, they have gotten the call that they have gotten the role, actually. Simon for being Wonder Man, and Trevor for Barnaby, who is the character that he is supposed to play in this series. Okay, let's get to the next episode because that was episode number 3. So this next episode is where I fully get into why. Um, let's actually get back to this for a moment. So this next episode is all about how it could possibly happen if Simon's powers get exposed, that he could actually end up in jail. So we get a big ass prologue episode, well, it's both a prologue and a flashback at the same time. But it's cleverly titled in this episode that you clearly know what is happening. And for that, I want to say first that it's called Doorman together, not with a hyphen in between. And it's because of a guy named that actually. It's in fact a nickname. There was another person also with powers who made something happen, which finally resulted in what's called the Dorman Clause. So let's get into that episode of Wonder Man. Okay, so this starts with a man named Demar Davis, who, just like Simon, is a person of color, a black man, who is a doorman at the Wilcox Club in Los Angeles, and he got exposed to a toxic waste from a company that is also very important in the Marvel Universe, Roxxon. And he got exposed to this to the point that, you know what, I'll try and get another picture here actually. So I'm not just straight up reading to you guys, and then you get to see some text. So that's this guy. Try to get a better picture here. Aha, here we go. So this is the Mar Dorman, played by Byron Bowers. That's this man right here. And so in this flashback prologue episode about him, about Demar Davis, he got sucked into a door-filled dimension, which has given him the ability to phase through solid material. Kind of like the ability that the Flash has to phase through things. Only for Demar, it is the difference of him acting literally like a door. And on that same, hmm, sorry, I had a little thing going through my head. So he has this ability to teleport things through his body, Damar. And one night, he helps out people at the club after a fire has broken out, which includes another huge person in the entertainment industry, ourselves, but in universe apparently too, and that is Mr. Josh Gad, who you might know from roles like, obviously, the big one is the snowman from the Frozen movies, and several other roles as well, which includes Beauty and the Beast. And the other movie I'm thinking of is the Agatha Christie movie. And so one night, the more Dorman Davis helps out several of the club patrons as a fire has broken out. And he ends up being a hero, actually. So Lamar here, with his ability, saves the club that he is working for and the people inside the club by letting people go through him quite literally so he can actually help out and actually ends up being the doorman. And the media jumps on this whole thing, which results in him becoming the literal doorman. And so Gad in this universe is an actor still himself, and he has just gotten an interesting hook with this for his latest movie, Cash Grab. And so Gad casts Davis as one of his helpers in that movie so they can use his powers in the form of a heist. And the movie ends up being a success. And the more our guy, played by Bowers, ends up being really good at it, at being both an actor and just in this movie, a movie inside a TV series. It gets pretty meta, folks. And so his celebrity starts to grow, but then, and I'm gonna have to go into real life stuff for a moment. Just like with anything, things get feedback and criticism and all of that, and he really starts to feed in on that, and he gets a lot of uh, not just good critique or feedback, but negative criticism, and he is actually not that good with it, and so that leads him to start to spiral. And I'll get back to that. I'm getting smaller again. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So still, that's our guy. I know this is black and white. Let me check for maybe a better picture here for a moment. Aha. All right, this is big enough. That's our guy, Byron Bowers. This episode is all about him. So the overexposure and the criticism, especially the negative part, leads Davis to alcoholism, and he gets a call back from Gad to do the sequel for Cash Grab. And in a moment, he loses control of those abilities, and Josh Gad disappears by, while he is trying to pass through the Mars body, trying to act as a door. And that leads to even more backlash for the Mar, and he ends up under lifelong surveillance. And that leads finally to what I called at the beginning for this episode the Doorman Clause, which is to ban superpower people from appearing in movies and television, and requires that actors sign the contracts that they have no powers. So that leads to Simon potentially doing something really dangerous if he is not dangerous himself by signing a contract that he has no powers. But it's clear he has, and Trevor has seen it at this point. Okay, let's get back into it with the next episode of this series as I'm talking about it to you guys. Okay, so the next episode is called Found Footage. Um, so after that big information, but actually subtly done or exposition from the last episode that makes it clear that Simon could be in real danger doing this, being a superhero doing filming. That leads us to episode 5, Found Footage, in which Trevor and Simon are celebrating, and he's already pretty anxious about what has happened with that call, while Slater is trying to hold off on Special Agent Cleary. But that leads to the guys again on another buddy cop moment as two actors, as the two of them get actually cornered by some guys that are saying that Trevor. I'm gonna get another picture here to help me. Ah, yeah, here we go. So this is a small picture though. Just a second. Ah, here's another guy. Important to this for a moment. So I'll head back to that other picture for a second. So this guy, the other one with the ponytail, finds Simon and Trevor, and he's implying that Trevor still owes money to him, and that gets them in a moment of kind of like, I know the proper name is an altercation, and it kind of has all the makings of a um. It looks like an arrest, but it's standard guys, goons in this case, and let's call it a standoff. They're trying to make sure that everything is going all right, but that leads to actually a fight breaking out as Simon has to use his powers for a moment, which leads to the other guy that I found that picture here just a moment ago to actually see this happen, and he goes off, and so we get another buddy cop actor style from the guys. And this guy is actually called Esteban, who has recorded this with his GoPro, which is those on your headset cameras. And part of the fight is that Simon has incapacitated all those guys. And so they get after this guy with the GoPro, trying to retrieve the footage. Ah, there you get the title, of course. And so they get into Simon's car as they now also have gotten the scene. Sorry, I have to sit differently for a moment. So they got the info for an upcoming scene for the new remake of Wonder Man from Janelle, actually. So they're about to do this buddy cop thing again. They just got the info from Simon's agents, played by X Mayo, who has gotten them some further information, specifically script for them to read. And so that sets them off on this little goose chase throughout LA, which includes where Trevor's character Barnaby has to betray Wonder Man for a price, and they get into the script and all of that. And they finally find the guy. His name is Jaden. That's this guy right here, not Esteban, but Jaden. And they get him. And Jaden says that he will delete the footage if Simon has to, if Simon can help him out with something, which is to return his stolen motorcycle from the guy named Esteban. That was what I was getting to, which leads them to Esteban's house, where it kind of looks, like like a drug operation because there's multiple people there trying to do stuff, but actually they're just making something very legit, some kind of fruity thing that I've never heard of. Yeah, and so those same drug dealers from earlier, gotta get that picture again. This guy, the other guy with the ponytail, has gotten his guys, the ones that got incapacitated by Simon. They have tracked Simon and Trevor to that house of Jaden and of Esteban. I'm sorry, and they are holding Jaden hostage. So this guy with the ponytail gets his hands on this guy right here, and they're trying to do this in another deal-like way, where they exchange Jaden for Trevor, and while they're trying to deal with this, the operation people in the house are helping Trevor out with deleting the footage. And while that was all happening, the police has have been called and they engage in a gunfight with those drug dealers, which leads to Jaden and Esteban uh, teaming back up while Simon and Trevor are getting out of there. And they then learn again from Simon's agent, Janelle Jackson, played by X Mayo, as I'm referring again, that they actually can go ahead and do and be part of the next round of auditions, are which are at Von Kovac's house, and that it has been moved up a day. And that's the end of that episode, of episode 5, which is another way. I'm actually going to get to it here again. So, uh, episode 5 is all about them building up the relationship again, especially when it comes to in conflict moments, because we get that uh, exchange between the drug dealers and then that supposed operation as well. But then at the beginning, too, the guy with the ponytail who says that Trevor owes him money, for whatever reason. So it's basically an episode to push Trevor and Simon even closer by going through something potentially harmful, and not just Simon being harmful potentially, because, like I said earlier, Trevor has seen that Simon has specific powers, and there's an explanation, by the way, how or rather what Simon can do, but we'll get to that point as well. Yeah. Okay, let's continue here. Do this again. So, next episode is called Call Back, which leads to auditions at Von Kovac's house. And so Simon and Trevor go to that place, which is a huge ass mansion, and they join the other actors who are about to portray the other characters in their auditions as well. And after what they just went through, Simon is absolutely exhausted. He has barely slept, which leads to Von Kovac pairing up the actors between the others. And so Simon and Trevor are now working together for this part. And they have to do some improvisation exercises. I'm actually going to try and get those Just again. Oh yeah, this later leads to this moment, which I will talk about in a moment. All right. So this leads into what Simon has previously done before, which is to try and overthink things and do late requests and all of that. While Trevor is absolutely just impressing everyone by his rich acumen of previous experience in his acting career. And so Simon has a specific falter where he's trying to recreate a scene from the movie Pretty Woman. And Von Kovac actually tells him that you need to do better, man. But he does this in his way, which is also with a dialect, pretty clear dialect. Again, that's the man played by Zlatko Burik. Hope I pronounced that right. So that leads to Simon actually, unfortunately, falling asleep, and he has a dream that he's in the same situation with the auditions. Let me see if I can. Yeah, so this is in the place in the mansion of von Kovac, and Simon unintentionally falls asleep. This is from other moments. That's von Kovac's assistant, by the way. And so Simon falls asleep for a moment, and he dreams that he is in the same place and having that experience, but instead he gets impatient and pissed off, and he kills one actor after the actor after one of them calls him a freak, which leads to him snapping out of it as von Kovac tries to get him with the program, quite literally. That was my phone. And this leads to a moment with where Simon has to step out for a moment, which leads us to this moment, I believe. Oh, all the picture for this. Oh, this one is out as well too. So they step out for a moment, have a talk, and Simon tells Trevor in this moment here, right here. This seems to be a still from earlier or from a blooper or anything. So here again, here's a good picture. So Simon tells to Trevor that he is very nervous or even afraid of his powers getting out of the way or even potentially harming someone because that could actually wreck his acting career, like I experienced earlier with the previous episode about the doorman. But that leads them back inside where they are now paired together. And with Trevor's help, they give a performance that impresses Kovac greatly, which leads him to finally drive, which leads him to finally cast them in the movie, in the roles that they are wanted, where Simon gets to play his version of Wonder Man, seen here in the original comic book version. A bit more like this guy right here. So Simon gets to play a new iteration of Wonder Man, while Trevor gets to play his sidekick, Barnaby. And we end things in this episode as Simon drives home, and Trevor is picked back up by the DODC. And first he gets berated by Cleary, again played by this guy, Aryan Moyat, for taking so damn long because they need that info. But then Slattery absolutely does what he is supposed to do in the movie they're about to starring, which is portray Simon and tells Special Agent Cleary that Simon does have the powers, but he does need more time to collect the evidence for that. Okay. And that's where the episode 6 callback ends, which leads to episode 7, of course, called Kathy Friedman, who is obviously a character that's about to appear here in a moment. For that, I'm gonna get a couple of pictures here first. There we go. So that's her, obviously. It's a small picture. And yet another one. I'm not at all nervous. So this is her, Kathy Friedman. And so they start to film the movie for Wonder Man. And we get kind of those behind the scenes kind of moments, like this one, for example. And so Simon is trying to do his best to be himself, but it's tough for him. But he gets a lot of help from his good friend, who's actually at this point a good friend. It's no longer just the two of them being different together, Trevor being a Brit and Simon being a black man, of course, but they seem to work together pretty well. So they are actually good friends at this point. So they end up in the movie trying to go through the right moments and all of that. And that leads to another show up from Janelle, again, played by the excellent ex Mayo in this movie. Uh, in this TV series. It gets a little meta here, guys. It's a movie inside a television series. And she informs the two of them that journalist Kathy Friedman, same name of the episode, is about to write a profile for them. And she is a journalist of the New York Times, who, even in universe, is also seen as a very well known paper. Yeah. Um, but Simon knows that Freeman is kind of seen as someone who tends to villainize you. And he actually describes her as a character assassin. And he's deadly afraid. Our guy here, Simon, is deadly afraid that Kathy might actually expose him. Not just to his friends or to um, just his close environment, the people around him on the crew and to the DODC and all, but to the world, really. And even more when he comes to learn that Kathy Freeman has already talked to his ex, to Vivian, but also to his mom and his brother as well. And so he goes to look for Vivian, who has a new job. This is her. That is a small picture right there. Well, let's make do. So, this is Vivian, Simon's ex, and it kind of goes like usual with couples that are no longer together. But she also tells him that she always knew that he had powers, but she never talked about that to Kathy Friedman, which relieves Simon greatly. And so he goes on with Trevor to go and do that interview with Kathy Friedman. And during this interview, he is also Simon is surprised. I'm gonna get back to a picture of Kathy Friedman for a moment. There she is. So during this interview, Simon is surprised that actually his brother spoke highly of him, which is interesting to him because that wasn't always the case, he thought, growing up. But then what absolutely happens here is that she's not out on Simon, but on Trevor, actually. And she asks him, sorry, I was crying back. And so uh, Freeman asks not Simon about his past, but Trevor's past as the person who used to be the Mandarin. So, this picture for a moment, which is actually kind of relevant because Trevor's actually wearing that same kind of outfit. And so she grills Trevor on that arrest that he had that I talked about with the prologue for one of the first episodes. The second one, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. The like I said, in the second episode we got that little prologue from Trevor when he got arrested by the FBI and then carried over to the DODC. And so Kathy asks him what the deal was that he had to cut to avoid returning to prison, which leads to Trevor walking off and not finishing this interview, as he is now convinced by someone that, yeah, she is a character assassin and that she's out for his blood, which allows Trevor to own up to Simon that, yeah, I did have to make a deal so I wouldn't end up back in prison again. That, yeah, I was used by the DODC to spy on you, to find a way of, or if you do have powers. But he tries his best to promise Simon that they will find a way to get out of all of this. But of course, that leads Simon to the point of absolute despair, which leads him to go to um, maybe I'll get that episode. This is a little more from the behind the scenes moment here. I am going by the seat of my pants right now, guys. Ah, here we go. It's a little bit of a small picture. Let's get a better one. Still not big enough for me. So Simon is absolutely upset by this. I was gonna get a good pick here. Maybe this one. Nope. Let's try again. But I'll say it like it is as I'm trying here. Uh, Simon goes absolutely ape shit in that moment, and he unleashes the power that he has, which destroys the damn place. Trying to get a good pick here from that moment. And the reason why I'm trying to get a good pick from this is because in that moment you see that as he is losing his shit and he unleashes his power, his eyes glow like crazy, and the place is just obliterated around him, which gives you a solid idea for just how freaking powerful he is. Maybe this one right here. Let's get that pick for a moment. Yeah, so you see it in the glow in his eyes for a moment as he's just angry and just full of despair and just out of his mind in this moment as he blows the place up around him. And so the entire soundstage absolutely explodes around him. And that is the end of the seventh episode, called after the journalist that was giving him and Trevor that interview. Which leads us to the last episode of this series, Yucca Valley. That leads to wait, I'm gonna get some more pictures here. Yeah, we'll get to that at that point. So after destroying the set, Simon returns back to his apartment because he's, of course, afraid that he will be caught. And he gets a phone call from Trevor to apologize and also to tell him that he has a solution. And we get that moment as and I need a specific picture, or maybe just this one. So Trevor digs up his old digs as the Mandarin, and he takes ownership for the explosion, taking the fall for his friend, and that leads to the DODC with Special Agent Cleary again, reprised in his role by Ariel Moyat from the previous uh, impersonations that he'd done in the MCU. Because Cleary knows that Trevor is taking the blame for Simon, but he is just going along with it because uh, he got, I suppose, a mandate to get more prisoners so that the DODC can actually justify the special prison that they have called Yucca Valley. So that's where that name comes from, which is that big ass place that we saw in previous installments. Actually, I'm gonna look that up for a moment. So, because we have seen that place before, actually, in She-Hulk Attorney at Law. It's this one right here. That's the Supermax prison from She-Hulk, or at least I believe so. It looks similar. Oh yeah, look, another one from Facebook again. It kind of looks the same. Okay. Yeah, so I'm thinking this is the same place that we see show up in this place called Yucca Valley. But this ends up being a mistake on the DODC part because Von Kovac, following Trevor's arrest, insisted they use this moment actually because just going into that Wonder Man film, because this is supposedly what actually happens in the Wonder Man film, where Barnaby betrays Wonder Man, and that leads them to finish it up and well finish up meaning wrapping the filming up to make it a solid Wonder Man movie, a new version with Simon as Wonder Man. And we get to the premiere actually of Wonder Man, where Simon is hailed for his portrayal of a new Wonder Man. And also, important thing here, Joe Pantoliano takes over the role that Trevor was supposed to be playing as Barnaby. But it feels to Simon kind of hollow as that is happening. Because we get a scene from him. I'm actually going to talk about you guys closely to this. We get a scene from them in the premiere watching it for themselves for the first time, where Simon is watching the screen and he just feels like, yeah, I'm proud of this movie, but this feels hollow without my friend because somebody else is doing it in his stead. And that's where we get to the ending of the filming in the premiere. And there's a few more things I want to show you guys before I end it up here myself. So back to here. Because while that whole thing might seem hollow to him, the film is a success to most people. And we get scenes with his brother actually. Let's get him back in here. Demetrius Gross And as Eric, like I said earlier, important character that might be returning in the MCU, maybe. Eric and Simon have a moment where Eric tells his brother that he is pretty proud of him, and Simon has another Simon has another moment with his agent with Janelle, again cast by again played by ex Mayo, where she tells him that he has now his pick for movies of what to do, uh, which I'm gonna get into a little personal thing here. That seems like such a real thing as well. Again, uh, a realistic thing. Like if someone breaks through, they tend to have then their full cards of projects that they want to go do next. Yeah, it feels like a very real thing, not just an in-universe stuff here, because, like I said, it gets pretty meta with moments here, and I say that because this makes it clear that fiction and reality are so close to each other. So a few more things here before we end it up. So we get some other scenes finally for Simon, and we see him actually. There was a few more that I wanted to show here. Just a second. Maybe I need another zooming back. Nope. We get scenes with him as he is what is called shadowing. That's an acting term to follow somebody around and actually try to imbue themselves with how somebody actually is working day after day. And actually, this is one of those scenes where Simon is shadowing this guy working for a place. Uh, this is, by the way, the actor that played the young version of Simon in the flashbacks. Because we did get a lot of flashbacks of this show. There's a lot of pictures from the Instagram of all these people. I'm not gonna go through all of them, of course. Speaks for itself. So Simon goes somewhere, starts to shadow this guy, wants to know more about him so that he can make a new film about this guy. But this finally gets us back to that place I talked before. Because the man that Simon is shadowing is actually working for that prison of the DODC, as in this picture, possibly. Maybe one of those. And so that gets Simon into that place, into that prison, just as we get the information how Simon's powers exactly work. So Simon uses something called ionic energy, as Cleary tells it to his boss. Actually, for a moment, I'm gonna head back to it. They always use the references from the show based on the original people of the same name. That's the one I need. Let's get into the character for a moment. So, powers and abilities. It says here, this is from the comics, this is not from the series. that Simon gained his superhuman powers due to the chemical and radiation treatments with ionic energy. And in the comics, it's from Baron Zemo, who we've also seen. And this gives him the standard strength, speed, stamina, durability, agility, and reflex superhuman abilities. And the way it's explained in the show, I looked that up actually on YouTube, but then I know I'm gonna get a copyright, so I'm not gonna use that here. It his abilities get crazy actually. What something that says here is, for instance, other abilities begotten from manipulating his own ion energies includes emitting force or flame beams from his hands and his eyes. So that's crazy. But also that he can change his size, enabling him to grow taller than even Goliath, which is another character we have seen. Um, I'm gonna get to you guys for a moment again. The remember Morpheus from the Matrix? That actor, Lawrence Fishburne, also plays a character in Marvel named Goliath. He appears in the Ant-Man and the Wasp first movie, where he portrays Bill Foster or Goliath, someone that used to work with Henry Pym, and so he's actually in a supposed opponent of Simon's, who can transform themselves by getting bigger. And there's actually a scene with him and Scott Lang about just how much that is. But it's really used for, well, I guess my Johnson is Johnson and yours kind of moment. Sorry, kids. And I'm gonna move for a moment. That leads to, well, I wanted to point it out because that is usually one of those opponents that Simon has, as I just read. Okay, let's get back to what I was reading for you guys for a moment, because there's a bit more that I want to say here. So he has a, his abilities originally from the comics are off the charts. He's incredibly powerful, but I'm not done yet talking about the series actually, because there's just a tiny bit more that I want to mention here. So Simon is in a prison in this supposed place, as seen in this picture right here, and he, after spending time as a DODC agent for a moment, has gotten access to the prison, just as Special Agent Cleary is explaining to his boss that with this kind of powers, it might be interesting more for them to use Simon not as a prisoner but as an asset. And we finally get a scene with Simon and Trevor. Let me get to a picture of that actually. Trevor, prison. Ah, here we go. Here's a picture of that. So we see him in behind bars, and they have a moment where they talk, and Trevor is surprised that Simon is there, but also they have this conversation where Trevor says that, you know, things will change if you do this, if you break me out of here, which, as seen in this moment right here, is exactly what they do. And we get to see this through the eyes of the agents as they try to capture Simon. But part of that interesting ionic energy that Simon has, as clearly seen in this picture right here, has been trying to explain to his bosses that it allows for Simon to play the cameras, but basically, like the kind of energy that Simon emits allows him to not be noticed by cameras, specifically CCTV cameras. And that's when we get this scene right here, where Simon uses his powers to get Trevor out of the DODC prison. And that's where the show ends. So, back to me here. That's everything from the series of Wonder Man. I personally loved it, which was interesting because at first I was not all sure if this was going to be a good TV series or not, but they absolutely blew it away from me. I remember when I first started watching this, that I was like, what am I doing here exactly with this? But then I saw the acting. I saw uh, Sir Ben Kingsley using his damn Shakespeare experiences and acting performances in that role, and I got so engrossed between the buddy cop energy that I got from those two that I'm glad I watched this series. And I urge all of you who haven't seen it, who think that the a spoiler warning is just nothing, to go and watch Wonder Man. It is absolutely worth your time. I don't usually do a rating on this podcast, but if I were to give you one, it would be a 9 out of 10. The only reason that it's a 9 is that it's that uneasy feeling. Like, you don't really know of what you're getting into at first, but for the rest, it's just plain perfection. Great cast, great series, great energy, great buddy cop kind of vibes, stuff like that. And also the deep lore from Marvel that they're now using for to go forward, in fact. And in fact, speaking of that, the going forward, uh, Wonder Man is actually very important for what's about to come next. Um, we're gonna get um, the next series from Marvel is going to be season 2 of Daredevil Born Again. That's not going to be relevant then, of course, but when it comes to the series that is coming after that, Vision Quest, it might be. Because Wonder Man is actually pretty important to the story of Vision. So maybe we'll see Wonder Man played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II again. Maybe in that. Maybe we'll make a cameo. And of course, that also leads into the whole Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff stuff with Elizabeth Olsen. And the reason I bring this up is because I learned that uh, Simon is pretty important when it comes to Vision becoming himself again. Because the last thing that we saw from the WandaVision series is that Vision is now going on a quest, quite literally, like the series Vision Quest, to becoming himself again. Because he is in his male phase again. He's just completely white, except for that thing in his head and the eyes, of course. And so I'm excited to see where this is going. So that is all of it for me. Okay, guys, thank you so much if you liked this episode of the FWX podcast about the new MCU property of Wonder Man. I hope that you liked it. Before I go, a final couple of things. Um, you can absolutely like this video if you want to. If you're subscribed to the channel and to this podcast, all my content will become a bit more available to people who like this kind of content. Specifically when it comes to the superhero stuff, of course, with Marvel specifically, which I like to talk about a lot. Um, or maybe also the DC stuff. I had a video about Superman that you can go check out if you want to. Um, Other stuff of me too. I talk a lot about fantasy, talk about a lot about franchises and action and superheroes. Uh, Final last thing about Wonder Man here. Not a damn lot of action, but when they do it, it's incredibly good. Okay, that's the last thing there. Okay, this has been an episode for the FWX podcast. I've been Frederik. I hope to see you guys in the next episode, and I will see you then. See ya.